Virgin Maid spent 5 years caring for paralyzed Millionaire. What he did after recovery shocked her. The first rays of morning sunlight spilled across the Charleston shoreline, filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of a coastal mansion where every polished surface, from the hardwood floors to the framed abstract paintings, spoke of one thing: power wrapped in isolation. This was the world of Nathaniel Carter, a 38-year-old self-made tech billionaire who had built a digital empire from the ground up. He was known for his precision, discipline, and something unspoken but universally understood. His heart was as cold as the stone walls of the home he lived in. No family, no close friends, just endless board meetings and unanswered emails. To Nathaniel, emotion was a liability, and attachment a threat. Meanwhile, in the dim staff quarters where sunlight rarely reached, another life moved quietly forward. Elena Brooks, 25, part-time housekeeper, her tight curls pinned neatly and her uniform crisp despite its low-cost fabric, had just started her morning shift. She was invisible here. Gliding through corridors like a whisper, Elena cleaned without leaving a trace. But inside her lived a soul full of deferred dreams. 3 years of nursing school paused indefinitely, textbooks shelved in favor of paying for her grandmother's medication and her younger brother's tuition. Once she'd dreamed of becoming a nurse. Life had chosen another path, for now. She knew every corner of this house, every scratch on the banister, every creak in the floorboards, every morning habit of the man she only glimpsed in passing. Colombian coffee, exactly 1 3/4 cups, no sugar, always consumed while reading the financial section at 7 a.m. Elena never met his eyes, and he had never once asked her name. But in just a few weeks, fate would bring their two parallel worlds crashing together. That afternoon, storm clouds rolled in earlier than usual, curling low over the Charleston skyline like a warning no one noticed. Elena was scrubbing the kitchen floor when the engine roared to life outside. She glanced out the window. Nathaniel's silver Aston Martin shot down the driveway like a bolt of lightning. Tires screeched against the damp brick, leaving sharp skid marks, one of the only things in that pristine estate that was ever out of control. She paused mid-task, a tight, anxious weight forming in her chest. That morning, while serving his coffee, she had noticed the fury locked tight in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched as he stared into spreadsheets. His fingers had gripped the porcelain cup so hard she thought it might crack. No one said anything, but she knew something was unraveling. The call came at 4:36 p.m. Elena was folding linens in the laundry room when Mrs. Delaney, the head housekeeper, burst in, her face ashen. "Elena, something's happened. Nathaniel's been in an accident. Rolled his car off Highway 17. They're taking him to University Medical." The towel slipped from Elena's fingers, landing on the floor. She didn't move to pick it up. "How bad?" Mrs. Delaney swallowed. "Bad. They're calling in his emergency contacts. But he doesn't really have any. Just his lawyer and private doctor." The house that once buzzed with quiet efficiency felt suddenly vacant, as if someone had unplugged it from its power source. That night, Elena lay motionless in her small staff bed. Rain lashed against the window like the sky itself was grieving. Beside her pillow, worn nursing textbooks lay open under the dim light, pages smeared with old highlighter and memories. She heard her grandmother's voice again. "You've got healing hands, Elena. Don't you ever forget that." Across town, in the sterile silence of an ICU at the University of South Carolina Hospital, Nathaniel Carter lay motionless. His spine had suffered irreparable damage. The doctors said he wouldn't walk again. Maybe ever. A man who once commanded thousands could no longer command his own body. And the woman who had been invisible in his world was about to become the most important person in his life. 3 weeks after the accident, the Carter estate no longer felt like a fortress of cold power. It felt like a tomb, quiet to the point of suffocation. Doors that were once kept firmly closed now stood open to make way for medical equipment, a custom hospital bed, floor-level lifts, mobility aids. The once frequent VIP guests no longer visited. Laughter from high-stakes meetings no longer echoed through the halls. Now there were only the soft hums of machines, the hiss of wheelchair tires, and the glaring absence of a man who once controlled everything. Elena still worked her daily shifts, but her movements had lost their spark. Her hands continued dusting polished surfaces and folding linens with care. Yet her gaze felt distant, subdued. This house, once the place she served, now seemed to be sinking, and she didn't know how to stop it from going under. That morning she was dusting the library shelves when Mrs. Delaney walked in, her voice weary. "They're bringing him home today." Elena froze mid-swipe, feather duster suspended in the air. "Is everything ready?" Mrs. Delaney sighed. "The bed's installed, bathroom's been refitted, but his state of mind, that's another story." In the past 3 weeks, they'd gone through 3 professional nurses. None had lasted more than 4 days. Elena had asked once quietly, "Why do they all quit?" Mrs. Delaney had answered with a heavy look. "He won't let anyone touch him, won't take his meds, curses, throws things. It's like he's daring people to walk away." From the library window, Elena watched the ambulance pull up to the estate gates. A mechanical lift descended slowly, revealing a man who now looked heartbreakingly small. Nathaniel Carter, the man who once walked like he owned the world, now sat hunched in a wheelchair, fire burning behind steel-gray eyes. His frame was diminished, beard unshaved, shoulders sunken, as if carrying a wound no scan could show. She couldn't hear his voice through the glass, but she saw his lips move clearly. "Get out!" And in that moment, Elena understood. No one could save him if he wouldn't let anyone in. The air in the main foyer felt heavy, like dust settled on long-forgotten marble statues. Nathaniel had just been wheeled into the house. 2 medical assistants were explaining the functions of his new electric wheelchair to the new nurse, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Patterson, the 4th in only 1 month. "This is the handbrake. The seat adjusts if needed for meals or therapy. And get out." His voice wasn't loud, but sharp enough to slice through the silence. "Sir," one of the assistants began, "we still need to help you get settled upstairs." "I said get out!" The shout erupted like a gunshot. It echoed off the stone walls, rattling the chandeliers. Mrs. Patterson flinched, struggling to stay composed. "Mr. Carter, I understand that you're tired and feeling overwhelmed, but you understand nothing." His knuckles went white against the armrests as he clenched them. "I don't need pity. I don't need someone to wipe me, feed me, or guide me like a child. I'm not dead. And I don't need you." Mrs. Patterson backed away, eyes reddening. I can't work with someone who refuses all care." She turned and all but fled from the house. From the shadows of the staircase, Elena had seen it all. She stepped out slowly, her voice calm as a breeze. "Mr. Carter." His steel-gray eyes whipped toward her. "Why are you still here? I told everyone to leave." "You told the medical staff to leave," she said, taking slow steps toward him. "I'm not staff. I'm the person who's been making your coffee for the past 2 years." Nathaniel narrowed his eyes. "Is this pity?" "No," Elena answered, not breaking eye contact. "I was thinking, you must miss your Colombian dark roast." Confusion flickered across his rigid face. "It's been 3 weeks since you've had it made the way you like. The hospital can give you painkillers, sure, but no one there remembers you like 1 3/4 cups. No sugar, medium strong. I do." For the first time in weeks, his gaze softened. a tiny crack in the frozen armor. "Why do you care?" "Because," Elena said gently, "some things shouldn't change, even when everything else has." She turned and walked toward the kitchen. There was no reply, but she heard the soft hum of wheels turning behind her. Nathaniel was following, and though it was just one small moment, it was the first step he chose to take toward life again. The scent of coffee filled the quiet kitchen, spilling into the silence between two people who used to avoid eye contact for more than 3 seconds. Nathaniel sat at the island counter, his eyes tracking Elena's every movement, the way she tilted the kettle, the way she tapped the coffee jar twice to get the perfect amount. Nothing wasted, nothing asked. Finally, his voice broke the quiet, rough but no longer sharp. "You're not a nurse?" Elena poured the coffee into a porcelain cup, tilting her head slightly. "Correct. I studied nursing for 3 years, but had to stop. Family reasons. 2 years left." Nathaniel accepted the cup, his hand still slightly trembling. Then, "Why are you doing this?" "Because I never forgot what I learned. About the body, about recovery, about how people in pain often push help away, not because they don't need it, but because they don't want to be seen as weak." Silence settled between them again. Nathaniel looked at her, longer than ever before. "All the nurses left," he said. "How long do you think you'll last?" Elena sat across from him. For the first time, they were at equal height, not boss and maid, not patient and worker, just two people. "I'm not a nurse. I'm not bound by protocol. But I understand that you don't respond well to pity or orders, so I'm offering a deal." Her voice was calm, deliberate. "I won't treat you like a patient. I'll assist you the way someone trained to care would. No formal charts, no pressure, just need-based help as long as you cooperate." "What's the difference?" "The goal. I don't want you to just survive. I want you to recover, physically and personally." Nathaniel looked at her again, this time not with suspicion, but with consideration. "Where do we start?" Elena offered a small smile. "By finishing that cup of coffee, then we try some breathing exercises. And if you don't throw anything at me, I'll help you with transfer training this afternoon." Nathaniel looked down at the coffee, then took a sip. "Not bad," he muttered. "Same old method," Elena shrugged. "Some things don't need to change." The east sitting room had been repurposed into a makeshift therapy space. Natural light streamed in through the tall glass windows, casting soft gold across the hardwood floors. Everything was quiet, except for the uneven rhythm of breathing and the creak of upholstery, as Nathaniel strained to lift his upper body using only his arms. Elena stood nearby, not instructing, not rushing, just watching with steady presence. "You don't have to pretend to be strong," she said softly. "We're not in a competition." Nathaniel panted, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. "I hate this feeling," he muttered through clenched teeth. "What feeling?" "Helplessness, needing people, having no control." Elena sat down beside him, her voice still calm and even. "When you ran your company, did you do everything yourself? Code the software, design the offices, manage every single person?" "Of course not. I had teams for that." "Then why now? Do you think needing someone means you've failed?" The question hit like a gentle slap. Nathaniel didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, he said, "Because back then, I chose them. Now, I'm forced to." Elena nodded. "Then the goal is to get that choice back. Recovery isn't about going back to who you were. It's about deciding who you want to be next." She paused, then asked plainly, "Are you scared?" Nathaniel looked away, his eyes fixed on the window. "Yes," he admitted. "I'm scared of everything. Scared I'll never be normal again. Scared no one will ever see me as me. Scared that even if I do recover, I still won't be enough for anyone to need." Elena reached out, laying her hand gently on his shoulder, not with clinical detachment, but with honest presence. "That's the most honest thing you've said in this house." She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. And in that silence, something inside Nathaniel softened. For the first time since the accident, his pain was seen, not judged, and that alone was enough to let him breathe a little easier. 5 years, not 5 weeks, not 5 months. 5 full years of Elena staying. Quietly, steadily, patiently. She didn't just manage his medication or assist with physical therapy. She taught Nathaniel how to smile again, gently reminded him of who he used to be, without forcing him to become that version again. Every morning she brewed his coffee. They watched the morning news together. She adjusted his rehab schedule based on how he felt that day, not what some program dictated. Though she wasn't yet a certified nurse, Elena brought something no textbook could teach: patience rooted in human connection. Over time, Nathaniel began to open up, not with dramatic monologues, but in scattered fragments. A childhood without parents, nights spent at the office to avoid returning to an empty house, failed relationships built on fear of abandonment. "Everyone expected me to be strong," he said one afternoon during an arm exercise, voice low and rasping. "So I learned how to become someone who needed no one." Elena said nothing at first, then she gently placed her hand over his. "I was the opposite," she whispered. "I had to be strong, because there was never anyone to lean on." One stormy night they sat together in the library, Nathaniel's usual refuge on difficult days. The room felt warmer than usual, the lighting softer, the rain outside like a quiet soundtrack for things unsaid. "I'm afraid," Nathaniel said suddenly, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Afraid of needing someone, afraid that if I let someone in, they'll eventually walk away, and I'll collapse because I've grown too used to the loneliness." Elena didn't respond right away. After a moment, she turned to him, her eyes glistening, not with tears, but clarity. "I've always had to be strong," she said slowly. "And now I'm scared of being held, because I don't know what that feels like." In that moment, neither of them said another word, but their hands found each other, not as caregiver and patient, not as maid and master, but as two people, once broken, now slowly relearning how to trust. That day, after the therapy session ended earlier than usual, Nathaniel looked at Elena with eyes that seemed to have held a question for a long time. "You once said you studied nursing for 3 years, he began quietly. "If you had the chance, would you still want to be a nurse?" Elena smiled, but there was sadness beneath it. "A dream is still a dream, Nate. It doesn't die, it just gets folded up, like a page left unread." "Then open it again," he said without hesitation. "Let me fund the rest of your education." Elena froze, as if she couldn't believe those words came from a man who once rejected help from anyone, now offering it to her. "No, I can't accept that," she shook her head, heart pounding. "You don't owe me anything." "It's not about owing," he said slowly. "It's because you deserve it, and because you've spent 5 years healing someone else. Now it's time to heal yourself." That night, in her small attic room, Elena lay staring at the ceiling. The ocean breeze drifted through the window, carrying the scent of salt and the sound of distant waves. She thought of her grandmother, of the look in her eyes the day Elena said she was putting school on hold. She remembered the first time she touched a patient in class, her hands shaking, but her spirit full of purpose. Her chest swelled with feeling, gratitude, doubt, fear, and hope. She didn't know whether to say yes or no, but for the first time in years, Elena felt seen, not as a quiet maid, but as a person with a dream still waiting. And maybe she was ready to choose it again. The next morning, when Elena brought Nathaniel his usual coffee, His gaze lingered on her in a different way, as if he had seen something within her, something even she hadn't fully admitted. A door quietly opening, and a part of her terrified to walk through it. "I wasn't joking last night," Nathaniel said, breaking the silence. "I meant it. You should go back to school." Elena set the cup down gently, her palms trembling just a little. "I know." "Then what's holding you back?" he asked, not pushing, just softly, like he already sensed the answer lived somewhere inside her. Elena looked at him for a long time before sitting down, fingers laced tightly in her lap. "I'm scared," she said finally. "Scared of leaving everything behind. Scared that if I walk away, everything we've built over the past 5 years will disappear. I'm scared that if I choose myself, you'll see it as abandonment." Nathaniel was quiet. His eyes never left hers. "Elena," he said gently, "the last thing I want is for you to stay because you feel obligated. If you choose to leave, I won't call it abandonment. I'll call it growth." Her lip trembled, tears welling but not falling. "What about you?" she asked. "If I go, what happens to you?" Nathaniel gave a quiet, bittersweet smile, the most honest she'd ever seen on him. "I've lived because of you," he said. "But I don't want to live through you. You taught me how to stand again, spiritually, emotionally. Now, it's your turn to walk on your own." The following week, Elena submitted her re-enrollment papers. For the first time in nearly 6 years, she stepped onto a medical school campus. Everything was different. New classmates, new routines, but one thing remained the same: the feeling that her heart had come home. She returned to the estate that weekend to pack her things. The small attic room where she once slept, once dreamed, once cried, now stood quiet but no longer heavy. On the bed sat a small envelope, a navy blue folder with bold handwriting. "Elena Brooks, registered nurse in the making." She laughed for the first time in weeks. Then she cried. Before leaving, she and Nathaniel sat together in the library, the same room that had witnessed their most vulnerable conversations. "Are you scared?" she asked, echoing the question he'd once confessed on a rainy night. He nodded, unashamed. "Yes, but this time it's the good kind of scared. I don't know what's coming next, but I'm not running from it anymore." Elena placed her hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. "I'll come back," she said, "but not as your caregiver, as your equal." "I'll be here," Nathaniel replied. And for the first time in his eyes, there was hope, not the kind that clings, but the kind that believes in something better ahead. The day Elena left, the mansion felt quiet in a way that was almost unbearable. Nathaniel sat in the library where they'd said goodbye the night before. Morning light streamed through the windows, but it no longer felt warm. He remembered the sound of her footsteps that morning, light, steady, but slower than usual. She had turned back at the door, smiled, a smile that wasn't sad or happy, but that of someone leaving a piece of her heart behind. And he had smiled back, calmly, bravely, as if he were the stronger one. But now, with her gone, Nathaniel felt an emptiness he couldn't quite name. No familiar footsteps in the morning, no perfectly placed cup of coffee, no gentle eyes that met his without fear or pity. He thought he was prepared for this. He was the one who encouraged her to go. But no one told him that doing the right thing could still hurt this much. For the first time in a long time, Nathaniel felt truly alone. And he realized the pain wasn't because she had left. It was because, after 5 years, he had finally learned what it meant to love someone fully. 2 years had passed. Charleston Community Hospital was as bustling as ever, but inside a small neuro-rehab room on the 4th floor, Elena Brooks was no longer the quiet assistant in the background. She was the one giving instructions. She wore a crisp white coat, her badge clearly displayed. Elena Brooks, RN, Neurological Rehabilitation. Her eyes now held a quiet confidence, the look of someone who had weathered storms, found herself, and no longer needed anyone else to validate that truth. "That's better, Linda," she smiled at a patient struggling to stand. "Nice and slow. There's no rush." Her phone buzzed gently in her pocket. A text message. From Mrs. Delaney Nate wants to see you. No pressure. Just if you still think of him. Elena stared at the screen for a long moment. Her heart tightened in a way she hadn't expected. It had been over 2 years since she left that house. No letters, no messages, nothing. But in the quietest nights, when the world grew still, she still thought of him, the man who taught her that some wounds only heal when we stop running from them. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, removed her gloves, and glanced at the mirror. A strong woman looked back at her, not a housekeeper, not a girl who sought worth in being needed. Elena nodded to herself. It was time to see him again, not as they were, but as who they'd become, grown, equal, and free to choose. When Elena walked into the Carter estate for the first time in 2 years, she was surprised by how little had changed, except for herself. The walls were still a soft gray. The windows still faced the sea. But the light inside felt different, gentler, warmer, as if the silence had stopped imprisoning and started listening. Nathaniel stood in the library. No electric wheelchair, no defeated posture. He leaned on crutches now, standing near the window. Thinner, hair a bit longer, but his eyes were steady, bright. When she entered, he turned and smiled. "You came." "I thought I should." They stood for a moment, long enough for silence to feel like an embrace. Then he placed a folder on the table. "I want you to look at this first." Elena opened it. Inside were architectural drafts, planning documents, permits, all labeled Carter Brooks Neurological Recovery Center. "I don't want it to just be a treatment facility," he said. "I want it to be a beginning, and I want you to run it." Elena looked up, stunned. This is real." "Completely. It's nearly finished. But no recovery center is worth a thing without someone who understands what recovery truly means. And I've never known anyone who understands it the way you do." She couldn't find words, but he wasn't finished. He pulled out a small box from his pocket, opened it. Nothing extravagant, just a thin ring set with a small quiet stone that shimmered like the woman in front of him. "Not because I need you," he said, "but because I choose you, not to care for me, but to build something good with me." Elena laughed through her tears. "You know I'd never marry someone out of pity, right?" "So would I," Nathaniel said. She nodded, and this time the nod was firm. "Then let's begin here." Stood one breath apart. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, like he was afraid it was just a dream. "Elena," he whispered, "don't leave again." "I'm not going anywhere," she replied, lips trembling. And then, without another word, he leaned in, and she tilted her face up. They kissed, a kiss that wasn't rushed or desperate, but reverent. A kiss that held 2 years of silence, longing, and unspoken prayers. That moment said what they hadn't dared before. No more hiding. They married a month later. It wasn't extravagant or flashy. Just a few loved ones, a handful of recovering patients, and the staff helping build their shared vision. The ceremony took place in the garden behind the Carter Brooks Center, a space filled with resilient plants, lavender, sage, eucalyptus. Nothing delicate, everything enduring. Elena wore a simple white dress with silk cuffs, her hair pulled back in a low bun with a single sprig of purple. Nathaniel wore a soft gray suit, leaning on crutches, but standing tall. When he saw her walking toward him, he couldn't stop the tears, and she smiled like someone who had survived something and still chose joy. As they exchanged rings, Nathaniel held her hand tightly and said, "Not because you saved me, but because you made me want to save myself." Elena replied, "And not because you needed me, but because you let me choose." When they kissed again, the wind passed gently through the garden, carrying the scent of healing things, like a whispered blessing. 1 year later, the Carter Brooks Neurological Recovery Center officially opened on a quiet spring morning. No red ribbon, no press, no long speeches. Just a bright modern building with a therapy garden overlooking green pines and soft rolling wheelchairs moving gently down brick paths. Elena Brooks, dressed in her white coat, stepped out from the administrative wing with a clipboard in hand. No longer behind the scenes, she was now the head nurse, overseeing the center's entire rehabilitation program. Down the far hallway, Nathaniel Carter was chatting with a male patient, his smile light and sincere. He still used crutches, but no longer avoided eye contact. He had learned to stand, not just on his feet, but in his heart. "Elena," a young nurse called from the reception desk, "our first patient is here." Elena nodded and walked to the main lobby. Waiting there was a girl around 18, pale-skinned and fragile in a wheelchair. Her eyes lifted as Elena approached, uncertain, searching. Elena knelt to meet her gaze, offering a soft smile. "Hi," she said. "I'm Elena. I used to sit on the other side of that chair, too. I've felt the world grow too big, too far. But here, you won't walk this path alone." The girl blinked as if something inside her had just shifted. On Elena's hand, a small silver ring caught the light, shining gently, not as a symbol of romantic love, but of choice, and of a life rebuilt exactly where it had once broken. And Elena thought, "I was once invisible. Now I am someone's light." The circle had closed, but the journey was only just beginning. The news came on a quiet afternoon. Elena was pregnant. She didn't say a word, just slid the ultrasound paper across the counter. Nathaniel's hand froze mid-sip. His eyes scanned the words, 10 weeks, twins. He looked up slowly, disbelieving. "Elena?" he whispered, breath caught. She only nodded, and suddenly Nathaniel laughed, a messy, half-broken sound, and dropped to his knees, not from pain, not from weakness, but because his joy had nowhere else to go. He looked at her, stunned. "Is this real?" Elena smiled and nodded. "It's real." In that moment, a man who once believed he'd never have a family laughed, not a polite laugh, but a full-bodied, tear-brushing joy. He didn't say anything else. He just held her, tightly, as if happiness might slip away if he let go. In the months that followed, Nathaniel became someone even he didn't recognize. He memorized every nausea schedule, attended every checkup, learned how to massage her back in the middle of the night. The once silent mansion now echoed with his voice reading baby books, her tired laughter, and the whispered, "Thank you for staying," she murmured each night as he rested his hand over her belly. The day the twin girls were born, the hospital seemed to hold its breath. When the nurse placed the tiny newborns in his arms and said, "Congratulations, Daddy," Nathaniel didn't smile at first. He just stood there, then slowly sat down, his hands shaking. And then he cried. For the first time in his life, not from pain, not from loss, but from receiving the greatest gift, a family. He held Elena's hand as she smiled through exhaustion. "You just gave me the whole world, you know?" Time passed. Their daughters, Ava and Claire, grew up surrounded by unconditional love. There were weeks when nothing improved, months when pain came without progress. Nathaniel had screamed, cried, cursed at mirrors, yet he kept going. Not because he believed in healing, but because every morning 2 tiny voices called, "Daddy, come!" And one morning, when Ava and Claire stumbled toward him, giggling, falling, getting back up, he stood. No crutches, no help, just him, and the love that had quietly rebuilt his legs from within. Elena saw it through the window. She didn't speak. She only wiped quiet tears from her cheeks, waves of gratitude crashing in her chest. From that day on, every afternoon, the three of them would walk together through the garden. Nathaniel often carried one, held the hand of the other, and told them stories about their mother, the woman who once quietly cleaned every surface in this house, and with those same hands lifted an entire family from ruin. "You know," he'd say, "your mom is the only miracle I've ever met." And somewhere in that laughter, Nathaniel heard it again, that faint whisper from long ago. Some things shouldn't change, even when everything else does. Only now he knew. This was the kind of change worth everything.